Well, good morning. Man, it's so good being here with all of you again on another Sunday together. And how about that time of worship this morning? Wasn't that great and encouraging? Appreciate Jasmine and the guys and girls leading us this morning. And if you're our guest here today, you just need to know that the worship, if nothing else, is always worth showing up on a Sunday for. Even if the messages are a dud, you leave encouraged. Our best, but sometimes, it just happens. But in all sincerity, really appreciate Jasmine and Heather leading us this morning, and there's actually another song left, so don't leave early. You don't want to miss that. But guys, I'm really excited to be here with all of you. For those of you that are our guests, my name is Jonathan. I'm one of the pastors here at River City Church, and we always love having new faces join us each and every week. Over the past couple weeks, it's been really encouraging for me because as I've been out and about just kind of living life, I've bumped into a few of you that I've never met before. And you've approached me at different places and said, hey, I'm so-and-so. We've been attending River City Church, and we love it. And guys, that's so humbling, and I'm so thankful for that. So thank you all for being here today. If you are a guest, we love having you here and appreciate you being with us. Today, we are continuing this series I started a few weeks back entitled Life is Too Short. And we all know that that's true, don't we? We all know life is short. We all feel that life is too short. And one of the things that we all have in common is that we don't want to waste a second of it. Isn't that true? Any of you want to just waste your life? Any of you? Okay, I don't see any hands. Good. I was about to say, just put your hand down, okay? But no, none of us want to waste our lives. What we want to do is just squeeze all the meaning, all the most important things out of this short time that we call life. And so what this series has really been all about is this, what I would call a 2-year journey that I've been on personally over the past couple of years, filled with lots of craziness and chaos. We've all been there. Mixed in with some personal things that I've been going through. All through this time, just looking to the heavens and saying, God, I see more than ever how short life is. But will you just teach me the way life is meant to be lived? Because I don't want to get to the end of my life and look back over it and say I wasted it. I want to get to the end of my life and say, no, I lived life the way it was meant to be lived. And so today I want to continue sharing with you one of the things God's been deeply, deeply convicting me over. And I'll have to start by telling you that it took place, or what triggered it, started last year. It was just seemingly a normal, not so exciting Friday last year in the month of January 2021. And I woke up and went through my message for that coming Sunday. And as I was going through the message, I actually felt pretty good about it by the end of the day, Friday. Now, to all of you, you're like, well, it took you till Friday to feel good about your message? Let me just tell you, there have been many of times I've actually driven to the church on a Sunday morning, stood on the stage not feeling good about what I was going to share. So this was a really good thing, okay? Now, I know some of y'all are going, how do you feel about today? I feel okay? We'll see how this goes. But I seriously, on that Friday, I felt good about it. I was like, man, okay, this is good. So I went downstairs. I was in a good mood, felt freed up for the weekend. And I walked in the kitchen, and my wife, Melissa, was in the kitchen, along with a few of our kids. And I just had this random thought go through my mind to pick up my phone and call my parents. We call them Nana and Pop, and ask them to just come over and hang out with us for a little bit. And, the kids hadn't seen them in a little bit. I haven't seen them in a little bit. And so I said to Melissa, I said, hey, are you cool with me doing this? She was like, oh, yeah. So I picked up the phone. I called my mom, and my mom answered the phone. And I said, hey, Mom, what are y'all doing? She said, well, sugar, we just got through eating some Mexican food, and we're resting. Now, we've all been there, haven't we? We've all eaten so much Mexican food before where you just have to rest afterwards. Y'all know what I'm talking about. It's like, man, that can really do some damage. So I was like, no, I get that. I get you need to rest. Just rest up. Take some deep breaths, that type of thing. And so she said, what are y'all doing? I said, well, I just had this thought. I know it's just not a lot of notice, but I just thought, man, hadn't seen you guys. How about you and Dad? Come on over here, hang out. Kids love to see you. I'd love to see you. We put Dad in the oxygen chamber. That always helps him feel better and that sort of thing. And so she just said back to me, she said, well, let me check in on your dad and just see if he's up for it. Now, for those of you who don't know, my dad, for over a decade, has had Parkinson's. So not only was my dad battling a full belly, my dad, when it comes to just a Parkinson's disease, he struggles with filling up to getting out a lot. So I understood she was going to have to try to sweet talk him into coming over. So I said, okay, well, do your best and then call me back. Well, 6 minutes passed by, and after 6 minutes, I saw my phone was ringing. I looked down, and it was my dad calling me. And immediately I thought, okay, I know where this is going to go. Dad's going to basically tell me, thanks for the invite, I love you, but no, I'm not coming over. So I answered the phone, I said hello, and when I said hello, there was no response. It was just the background of the TV noise that was in the background here at his home. And so this isn't abnormal, because with Parkinson's, with tremors, sometimes you can't push the buttons very well and get the phone to your face. So I just waited for a minute, and I said hello, and it was nothing. It was just TV noise. So I was like, okay, well, I hung up, and I said, he'll figure it out, he'll call me back. About 5 minutes passes by, and Dad hadn't called me back, so I picked up the phone. I said, well, I'm going to call my mom now, because I know she'll answer the phone. So I called her up, and first ring, she answered, said, hello. I said, hey, Mom, I said, did you talk to Dad about whether or not you're going to be able to come over? And she said, yeah. And I said, okay, so are y'all coming over? And immediately, she began to say, I can't. And when she said that, I paused, because as weird as that sounds to y'all, we sometimes hear that from my mom. Because if my dad is highly anxious, her talking about things that make him more anxious makes his tremors really bad. So sometimes she'll say, I can't talk right now. And so I just figured that's what was going on. So I walked off into the dining room, and I said, okay. And I changed my approach to ask her questions where she could answer with yes or no, just simply yes or no. So I asked her some questions, and it was just silent. And I sat there, and I said, Mom, are you there? And she just went, I can't. And then I knew something was wrong. And I immediately said, Mom, can you not speak? Can you not talk? And she said, And I said, Mom, get the phone to Dad. Can you get the phone to Dad? And so she was able to hand the phone to my dad, but my dad, because of his Parkinson's, he was in a place at that time, he couldn't press the buttons, he couldn't put me on speakerphone. So I started trying to speak to him, and he could barely hear me. So I'm literally yelling in my phone to where he could just hear it through the ear, if you will, while sitting in his lap. And I started yelling at my dad, saying, Dad, is Mom okay? Is Mom okay? And I walked off into my office, and then I said, Dad, is Mom okay? And he said, yeah, son, we just got through eating Mexican food. It was great. And I said, Dad, I know about the Mexican food, okay? I know the Mexican food's amazing, okay? That's not what I'm wanting to know. But is Mom okay? He said, yeah, she's just resting. I said, what is she doing? He said, she's just laying over there resting. I said, Dad, I think Mom may be having a problem. She can't speak. And he was like, no, I think she's fine. I said, Dad, I said, ask her right now if she's okay. And I listened, and Dad said, Valerie, Jonathan wants to know, are you okay? Are you feeling okay? And I listened, I didn't hear anything. And I said, Dad, did she say anything? He said, no. I said, what is she doing? He said, she's just looking at me. I said, how does she look? He said, confused. I said, Dad, Mom is having a stroke. I said, I'll be right there. Some of you have been here, right? You know what this is like. Is you go into this operation rescue mode. Everything is very, very narrow. And in that moment, everything was blocked out. I could just see one thing, and that was I need to get over there as soon as I could. So I hung up the phone. I ran through the house. I was gathering my things. I called Tim on the phone, one of my brothers, and I said, hey, man, I think Mom's having a stroke. Let's get over there. Tim and I are racing over to my mom's house, my dad's house. I called another friend who's in the medical field. I said, hey, bro, it's in the middle of the COVID craziness. Where do I need to take her so that she can be seen? He told me the hospital to take her to. And when we got over to my parents' house, my mom was an absolute hot mess. She called her couch her car. She called her her phone, the swimming pool. She didn't even have a swimming pool. She called me names I can't repeat on the stage at church, okay? She called me other names that I never heard before. She was saying all kinds of stuff, and we knew, okay, we have to get my mom to the hospital. So we got her in the car. We raced off to the hospital, talking to everybody, trying to connect and all these sorts of things. We get her to the emergency room. We take her in. And when we took her into the emergency room, there was a couple of things that took place, but they began to look at her vitals. And, of course, her blood pressure was just through the roof. Her blood sugar was just off the charts. And she couldn't speak. And, it was just in seconds. Like, it was all taking place in seconds. But one of the most amazing blessings, I'm trying not to get emotional and reliving this. But one of the most amazing blessings was that when we went to the emergency room, we checked her in. A friend of our family, who's an ER nurse, just happened to be one of the nurses there that night, who my mom knows very well. Her name's Kay. Some of y'all know who Kay is. And so we walked back in the back, and Kay began to love on my mom and comfort my mom, which was very comforting for me. And she began to talk through everything. They put her through the battery of tests and all the scans and all these things. And they finally came back and said, we really believe or can see that your mom has had a stroke. And so they were going to have to transfer to another hospital. And before Tim and I left to go back home, I looked at Kay, and again, this is just all this stuff swirling around, and it's surreal, right? It's surreal. That one minute she's fine, she can talk about her Mexican food, the next minute she can't even speak. And in that moment, I looked at Kay and I said, Kay, I called her, and when I called her back, she had the stroke while I was on the phone with her. And I said, and my dad didn't even know anything was going on. And Kay said, Jonathan, it happens all the time. Where people will have these types of experiences, and they think they're just tired and they'll go to sleep, and you don't know something's wrong until it's too late. And I looked at her and I said, Kay, I don't know how this works with God, but it wasn't like I felt like anything was wrong, but God must want my mom here. God wants my mom here. And so Tim and I drove back home, saw my dad. We tried to put a game plan in place, encourage him as much as we could, figuring all that stuff out. And then I got in my car and I began the 2.5 minute or so drive home. And as I was driving home, I was looking up at the lights. And as I was just cruising along, I was praying and I was saying to God through tears how grateful I was. How grateful I was that however all that worked out, that I called her in the moment that she had a stroke, because my dad would have never known. I mean, he thought she was just full from Mexican food and tired. And then not only that we were able to get her to a hospital, and that Kay was there, and that were able to get her there in the time, because there's a window of time, as you all know probably with strokes, that you need to get treatment quickly. And I was just so thankful. But here was the other emotion I experienced too. I was grieved. Man, I was grieved. Because it was as if God gave me a set of glasses, a new set of glasses to look at my life through. And as I looked at my life, with my mom's life hanging in the balance between life and death, I did not like what I saw. I looked at my life and I saw that I had been too busy. I'd been too distracted, too pulled away from who and what mattered most. I was looking at my life and I knew that my attitude needed to change, my actions needed to change, that my life needed to change. Because it was in that moment I knew that love is the most important thing in life. It's not our careers. It's not our money and our stuff. It's not our hobbies. It's none of those things. It's not social media and how many likes you get or followers you have. Love is the most important thing in life. Now, let me ask you, have y'all ever been through something like that? Something to where in that moment, it's as if God just awakened your soul to see that love is the most important. Have y'all ever been through something like that? Yeah, sure you have. And in those moments when it's like He gives us a new set of glasses, and what we see that's true and is clear is that life is too short to not live with love. Isn't that true? That when the dust settles, when it's all just kind of cleared out, life is too short to not live with love. And what's interesting is oftentimes the way God opens our hearts to this is something we know in our head, right? We know this in our head cognitively. But in our hearts, we struggle to see it. We struggle to live it out. But it's in those moments, it's kind of like in the movies, that when these types of things happen, it's as if everything that tends to pull at us, all the demands, the pull of progress, the tyranny of the urgent, all those things, it's like they just stop in midair. And they don't have the power over our lives like they normally do. And in those moments, we're able to see that the most important thing is living a life of love. But let me ask you, have you seen that on the other side of those crises, that as the dust settles, as you move past it and it's becoming more difficult to see in the rearview mirror, that our lives tend to go back into the rut that they were in before? Have y'all noticed this? See, like in the moments where everything's so clear, love becomes central, and everything else kind of gets pushed out to the edges. But then over time, what begins to happen is with the pull of progress, tyranny of the urgent, and all that, those things begin to become the center of our lives, and love begins to get pushed back out to the edges. And we see this, and we know this. And we know again in our heads, love's most important, but when it comes to living it out, we all wrestle with it. Just to be real with all of you, this message, writing this for today, was probably the most difficult message I've had to write in quite some time. Because over the past week or so, as I have thought about just that incident and that eye-opening experience with my mom's health last year, and where I am today, and the things that God made so clear in my life back then to where I am right now, I felt like such a hypocrite. Because I'm not living out what He showed me then like I know that I should. And then to add insult to injury, I have to write a message about living a life of love, and I have family in here listening to me right now, okay? How awesome is that, right? Like, they know me. They live in my home, or they're around me more than anyone else, and close friends. And I'm thinking, and so I even this past week had this thought run through my mind, like, God, should I just call Eddie? Like, I think he's better at doing this than me. And just, let's get Eddie in here. Let him give it a shot. And, I'm feeling sick again or something, And, but God, I think, just really convicted me and said, Jonathan, look, lean in. I want to continue to work in your life. And I want to share what I'm teaching you with other people. And so here we all are. We all know in our heads, love is most important. But we struggle with it getting squeezed out of our hearts. There's something going on in our hearts that needs to be dealt with. And what I want to do this morning is someone who has a very, very, very long ways to go. I want to share with you what God's been teaching me is going on with our hearts, so that hopefully we can connect what we believe in our minds with our hearts, because we don't live from our brains all the time, do we? We live from here, so that we can get our heart in alignment with what we know is true, so that we can live the life that we were created for and the life that we know is most important. So for us to do that, I want to take you first and foremost to a passage of Scripture in the New Testament that the Apostle Paul wrote to his friends in Corinth. You all know this passage of Scripture is known as the love chapter, right? In 1 Corinthians chapter 13. And the reason why I want for us to look at this is because when Paul wrote this letter to his friends then in the first century that were Christians, he was writing to a group of people that were not getting this right. He was wanting to encourage them and teach them or remind them of the importance of love. So this is something I think that relates to all of us. So in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, beginning in verse 1, here is what Paul began with. He said, if I speak human or angelic tongues, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so that I can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. And if I give away all my possessions, and if I give over my body in order to boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Now, this is powerful, isn't it? Because you can tell that when Paul wrote these words, that he had really thought this whole love thing through. He had really thought about it a lot. He wasn't whimsically just kind of saying, now guys, just go out and love. No, he was very thorough in his analysis and what he said in his argument. Because there was this one big idea that Paul was convinced of, he wanted for his friends then to get, and what I believe God wants for us to understand today. And that is that love is the point of life. Love is the point of life. When you think about life, love is the point. That's it. Love is the point of life. And Paul wanted for his friends to get this, to be reminded of this. And so what he goes on to do, as you just read with me, is he illustrates this through a few examples. He begins by saying, if he had the ability to speak as an orator so eloquently, where he could pick and choose whether to speak of the human language or of the angelic language, to the point where as he spoke, all of us would just lean in on the edges of our seats, just waiting for him to say things. Like he was that amazing. He said if he could pull that off, and he didn't have love in his heart, he said all it would be was just noise. Just annoying noise. He went on from there. He said that if he were so spiritual and so godly, that he could take the truths of God and proclaim them and knew the mysteries of God, and he could speak into the world and what's going on, and even have faith to the degree that he could tell the Smoky Mountains just to move a little bit to the left, and they did it. Well, we all looked in amazement. He said if he could pull all that off without love, he said, I am nothing. And then he concluded, he said, if I took everything I have and I gave it away, and I even gave myself away, but I did it without love, he said, I gain nothing. You see, Paul wanted everyone to understand that when it comes to life, love is the point. It is the point. You can do everything, achieve everything, gain everything, and if you don't live a life of love, you waste your life. You absolutely waste your life. But he didn't stop there. He went on to describe the nature of love, or what love is. Look with me starting in verse 4. He says, love is patient. Love is kind. Love does not envy, is not boastful, is not arrogant, is not rude, is not self-seeking, is not irritable, and does not keep a record of wrongs. Love finds no joy in unrighteousness, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. Okay, I need a sip of water after that. So let me just quickly find out, any of you a little convicted after reading that? Okay, not enough of you are. Okay, so let's read it again. And I'll read a little more slowly this time, okay? Love is patient. Ouch. Love is kind. Ouch, ouch. Love does not envy. Oh boy. Is not boastful. Do I need to stop now? Is not arrogant. Is not rude. Is not self-seeking. Is not irritable. And does not keep a record of wrongs. Love finds no joy in unrighteousness, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. A few more of you convicted now? You know, I don't know how you can read that with an open heart and not be convicted. Because what Paul does in his description of love, the nature of love, he's saying love is selfless. Love is sacrificial. That's the nature of love. That's what love is. When I was reading as I read through what Paul said, this past week I began to think about a guy that I had a relationship with years ago who just came to mind because this is a special dude. He was one of those guys that when I met him, he was all about love. He was just all about love. Love, 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 love. Now, all you dudes know this, that guys don't really talk about love very much, do we? Ladies, you know this as well, except on like Valentine's Day, you know? There's usually a reason for that too, right? So guys don't really talk about love. Don't talk about love like we should. Just a reminder, fellas, tomorrow's the day, okay? There you go. But this guy, he talked about love all the time. That's what he did. And so he would talk about how that love is most important. Love's number one. We all just need to love each other. Love, 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 love. He was like a love evangelist. And so he was just unique in that way. And as I got to know him and build a friendship with him over the years, what I began to notice is that this guy surely loved to talk about love. But when it came to being on the other side of him, he was one of the most unloving people in my life. That to be on the other side of this guy, he was combative, he was mean, he was demeaning, he was argumentative. He just left people in his wake. And at times I thought to myself, like, what is going on? Like, what is going on with this fella? And then it finally clicked one day that he was in love with an idea of love. He was in love with an idea of love. And not the idea of love or the way Paul describes it. The truth of the matter was, this guy was in love with himself. He was in love with himself. Now, before any of you get mad at me and say, that's a very unloving thing for you to say, Pastor, about someone else being unloving, just hang with me and let me tell you why I bring him up. You know, God actually used him in a tremendous way in my life. Because being on the other side of him, I was able to see the disconnect between what he said and what he believed in his mind, but then what he was living out from his heart. And I saw, okay, so that's what it's like to be on the other side of him. What's it like to be on the other side of me? I've never been on the other side of me, so I don't know these things. But as I began to reflect on what he was doing, I began to see, oh, okay, this is my struggle as well, where I know that love's most important, but I'm not living it out. And the best way I can illustrate what God showed me, which by the way, Jonathan Dunn can be a little bit in love with himself too from time to time, okay? Shocker, I know, except for my family. And you can too, okay? So don't judge me. But here's what God showed me. Here's what God showed me, and I'll show you in this pic. I think this will help illustrate. What God showed me is the problem in my heart. It's that I'm selfish. And when my heart is filled with self-centeredness, my capacity for love diminishes. That's what's going on. The reason why I don't live in a loving way toward other people is because the nature of love is selfless and sacrificial, and here Jonathan is struggling with being selfish. And so as my self-centeredness rises, my capacity to love diminishes. Now, the way the Spirit has been speaking to me about this very practically, and I think this will help a little bit in understanding what I'm speaking to, is that as I have been on the other side of people that I feel inside of me that they're hard to love. Been around someone that you would say you feel like they're hard to love? Anybody? Okay. Now, don't look at your spouse, okay, or your kids. But isn't it true? Like, you feel that inside of you? Like, man, they sure are hard to love. I like the easy ones, you know? What God's been teaching me is that hard to love signal that I feel in me is really, the way I'm reading that oftentimes is that there's a problem with them, but actually I'm misreading it. It's actually revealing there's a problem with me. What people who I feel like are hard to love is showing me is that my level of love is very, very low. That inside my heart, I'm filled with me, and my capacity for love is very shallow, and all they're doing is helping me see what you see on the screen. Is that I'm full of myself. Because see, by nature, love meets people where they are with what they need. And when I feel like someone's hard to love, what I'm really saying is that I don't want to be patient toward them. I don't want to be kind toward them. I want to hold on to a record of wrong or what they've done and how they've done me wrong. And all it's revealing is that I am the issue, that I'm full of myself, and that's why I find them hard to love. You see, the truth of the matter is love does meet people where they are. Love is selfless. Love is sacrificial. And so what needs to happen, I think, can be seen in this next pick, and that is the opposite needs to take place in each of our hearts for us to live the life that we are created to live, really the life we long to live. Things need to go in the opposite directions. Self-centeredness needs to drop, and our love in our hearts needs to increase. Now, I know that's a mind bender, okay? That's some rocket science for you, but this is really what needs to happen. In short, our hearts have to be transformed. In short, I have to get over myself. You, I hate to say this, no offense, you need to get over yourselves. How's that for some encouragement on a Sunday morning at church? But isn't it true? If love is selfless and love is sacrificial, the only way to really live the lives that we long to live, what we were created for, is we have to get over ourselves. But for that to happen, our hearts have to be transformed. But that's the question, isn't it? How can selfish people transform their own hearts? How can our hearts go through this transformation process to where we become selfless and filled with love? Well, I really believe that Jesus answered this question in an encounter that he had, a very well-known encounter, when a guy actually approached him one day. He was a spiritual guy, and he approached him. He said, "Rabbi, what is the greatest commandment?" Y'all remember this? And Jesus, of course, responded, and we'll look at his response in a minute, but to really put this and frame this up in the context, I think for us to understand it, we need to think of it like this guy approached Jesus. He's a guy that took God very seriously. He was a Jewish individual. They had 613 commandments. Can you imagine that? Imagine that. Wow. It'd take you 2 years to preach on them one by one if you did something like that. And he approached Jesus, and what he was really asking is, okay, Rabbi, help me understand in this world that we live in, this short time of life that we have, as far as God is concerned, what is the top thing that I need to do to where everything else just kind of falls into place underneath that? Like, what is that thing? And you know what Jesus said. Here's what he said, Matthew 22, verse 37, 38. Jesus responded with, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and the most important command." Jesus' response to what is the top priority of life, where does life start, all those things was to love God. Love God. What was the point Jesus was communicating? I think you could summarize it in this way, that a life of love starts with God. A life of love starts with God. Life starts with God. The order matters. That before you're to love your pets, because I know we have some pet lovers, before you're to love your spouse or your parents or your kids or your grandkids, I had to say that because some of you love your grandkids more than your kids, okay? Before you love any of them, Jesus said, you love God with all of your being. All of your being. The order matters. Now, why does the order matter so much? I'm glad you asked. Let me show you. John, one of Jesus' closest friends and disciples, wrote a letter to some of his friends wanting to encourage them to love one another. And I want for you to see how he encouraged them to do this and what he was anchoring his encouragement in. In 1 John chapter 4, verses 7 and 8, he wrote this, "Dear friends, let us love one another, because love is from God. And everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. The one who does not love does not know God, because God is love." The reason why the order matters so much, that you have God as the one that you love with all of your life and all of your being, that you give yourself to Him every day, and you experience His love in your life. The reason why it matters so much is because, as John says, God is love. He is the source of love. Love is from God. That the way we are created to live our lives from the very beginning is not to manufacture love for each other, but to experience the love of our Father, to draw that love in, to soak that love up, and then to pour that love out to one another. And so if we in any way get that order out of place, the life we're created to live, a life of love, is not a reality. And it's all dependent upon your relationship with God. You must get that right, Jesus said. The order matters. Loving God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. So, to summarize, let me put this slide up. On the left is where we all are. In our minds, we know love is most important. Love is the point of life. That if we get to the end of our lives and we don't live out a life of love, we waste our lives. We know that. But on the left, we see our struggle. Our struggle is we're selfish. We like ourselves a lot. And as we are selfish, our capacity for love is diminished. It's shallow. But to really love requires us to be selfless and sacrificial. And what has to happen is what we see on the right. And the way that that transformation takes place is when we go to God and let Him love on us, and we love Him in return. He becomes our great love in our lives. See, the reality of it is that until we prioritize the one who is love, we will never experience the life of love that we long for as a reality in our life. It doesn't happen. And I think that's really the problem. As I've thought through my life and just the way my life ebbs and flows and these sorts of things, what I've seen consistently is the pattern that underneath all this, the reason why I struggle so much in living the life that I'm created for and that I long to live is because my priorities just get out of whack. That instead of God being first, I start putting other things first. I can put my spouse first, my kids, the church, whatever. And it just kind of all gets botched up, and God just keeps falling down the list to where at the end of the day, God's not my number one, God is somewhere else way below that. And so my time with God turns into more of just praying over a meal and asking Him to bless a cheeseburger or something like that, right? Please make this nutritious, God, please. It's just goofy stuff. That's a good signal to know you're not really enjoying God, right? When you're asking to bless your cheeseburger. But that's what happens, and our priorities just get out of whack. And when our priorities get out of whack, what we oftentimes do is we know that we're empty, we know we're missing God, but what we oftentimes will say to ourselves or say to others is, I don't have time. I just don't have time. But isn't it true we do have time? We do. The real issue is not a time problem, it's a heart problem. That we are loving lesser things than the one who is love and the one who gave us life in the first place. That's what's happening. And so our priorities just get out of whack. And so what I have seen is that the way God changes our hearts is not through lectures. It's through His love. So be encouraged. God's not going to change your heart this morning through a sermon. He will change it when you, hopefully, as a result of what I'm sharing with you, go and get alone with Him and just let Him love on you. His love or His kindness is what draws us to repentance. It's not the wrath of God, friends. It's not the lectures. It's just His love. He teaches us how to love. He changes our hearts. As I began the message by talking about the situation that happened with my mom, some of you are thinking, what happened? Sorry to keep you waiting. But a crisis of health like that, my mom's okay, by the way. Thankfully, she's doing pretty well. And we're grateful she's with us. But God oftentimes awakens us to this truth about love through health crisis in our own lives or those that are closest to us. But what I'm learning about God, and as it pertains to love, is that God doesn't awaken us to these things for us just to only love them and say, okay, well, I need to get better at loving my mom and my dad and my wife and my children and all that. And I need to really work at that. That's not His main goal. You see, the main goal of God is for us to love Him, and as we love Him and let Him love on us, is that He would fill our hearts up with so much love that yes, those closest to us get the spillover of that love first, but that as we live our lives, love spills out of us to everyone that we encounter. You see, what God really wants to do is to change you into becoming more like Jesus. To where you don't see love as something that you do, but to where love is who you are. Where He changes you to become more like Him. That's what He wants to do. And the only way that takes place is when we put Him first. And we get alone with Him. And we pray and we worship and we open our hearts to Him. And we ask the Holy Spirit, who is the love of God that's been given to all of us, to just continue to transform and change our hearts. And what I've noticed that He does in my life, and you'll be able to tell when I'm having a good day and when I'm having a bad day, okay? Let me tell you what He shows me. Is that when I'm really in that place with God, He begins to change my thinking process when I encounter people who need love from me. From asking myself, okay, what does this do for me? To asking, really, what do they need from me? That's when you can really tell that He's doing something in your heart, that you look at things and situations and people that need you to sacrifice or to be selfless, and instead of saying, what is this for me, or what's in it for me, you begin to see the shift take place to, what do they need from me? My prayer this morning, before I even showed up today, is when I was with God, I just stood there and I said to Him, I said, Father, I want for this to be true in my life. I don't want to just speak to it. I want it to be true. And I said, God, I want for You to just pour Your love into my life and change me as a person to be love. And if that's what you want this morning as well, I want to invite you just to join me in opening your heart to heaven, to your God, and saying, God, I want this to be true. I want this to be real. I need You. Will You do this in my life?